The New York Times found that thousands of public school students are being funneled into Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps classes without their consent. That's the JROTC. Schools are listing these classes as an explicit requirement, as well as automatically enrolling the students, and it sounds like making it difficult for them to opt out. The Army says 44% of all soldiers who entered its ranks in recent years came from a school that offered a JROTC program, according to the Times. Thank you for bringing this story to our attention, Briahna. So Briahna's suggestion, this is very worrying.
It's incredible. So the size of these JROTC programs has apparently tripled in recent years. A lot of schools are inclined to want to use this to supplement some of the funding issues and are incentivized in that way. But there are a lot of problems with this. First and foremost, there's been a lot of talk about indoctrination and wokeism in public schools. Some of the parents are concerned that there is a dishonest valorizing of American history, whitewashing of American history, so that the Trail of Tears apparently was described without talking about thousands of Native American peoples dying as they were forced from their lands. One parent who's was in the Navy themselves says, I would be happy if my daughter voluntarily entered this program if she wanted to do it, but she was forced into it, and there have been incidents of more kind of punitive punishment. His daughter was grabbed by the shoulders during an incident that wasn't at all disputed. And another issue is that the schools at which these programs are being implemented are disproportionately ones that feature lower income Black and brown students. So the Times found that among schools where at least 3/4 of the freshmen were enrolled in JROTC, over 80% of them had a student body composed primarily of Black or Hispanic students. That was a higher rate than other JROTC schools overall in the country. So, I mean, the picture this paints is that almost half the military is being populated by kids that are fast-tracked into the military without given the option to choose their own choices in life, that are disproportionately from marginalized groups and who aren't given a way out. And that is not a really good look for a country that is holding itself up as an army that's defending freedom around the world. These kids don't even have the freedom, it's apparently, to decide whether or not they want to join the armed forces.
Well, and it sounds like even the JROTC doesn't think it should be required at all. They give several comments in this article saying, no, we always maintain it should be voluntary. We have an all-voluntary army. It should be voluntary admission. I can see how this, well, you can see how this happens, right, at a high school, because when you get to, maybe your third and fourth year and you get more choice over what your classes are, even at the college level, then there are a couple advanced classes, but and then there's the other options, but like somebody has to take them. So the people who low income, less achievement because of their background get funneled into those because they have to have a certain number of people in those, because you're not going to not have the teacher teach that one. And then, so it becomes, while it's a choice because you get to pick your classes, you didn't place into the other ones, those are full, you got to do something, and it's that. And that is a very, I agree with you, troubling dynamic.
Well, look, and don't forget this story that we covered, a couple of months ago, probably when we were in the midst of all of the student debt conversation. A number of conservative lawmakers were very explicit about the fact that if we cancel student debt, it's going to hurt military recruiting, right? There was this admission, as it were, that part of why there's a benefit to all of us being so indebted and for so many young people feeling like they don't have a lot of options is because otherwise the American military wouldn't be able to hold itself out as a volunteer military. At a certain point, if people basically didn't have to go into the military for health insurance and to pay for college, to pay for any advanced degree, or basically just to have any kind of job prospects whatsoever, then it would paint a very different picture of how coercive the system is. And student debt and student loans are a huge part of what's holding this whole puzzle piece together. I think that's disgusting. It's a real problem.
Yeah, I think it's a problem at the level of high school students. They have, I think their First Amendment rights should be more broadly protected. Their ability to object to state-issued propaganda, et cetera, in all of their classes. I don't even like the DARE program, to be frank. It's
interesting that you say that, because we talked about this once on the show. When I was in school, one of the big issues was whether or not ROTC could be on campus. And because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell at the time, there was a big student movement and faculty movement. Everybody, a lot of people on campus didn't want ROTC's presence on school grounds. Well,
that was true during Vietnam as well. I assume that's not the campus days you're referring to.
No. I'm not that much older than you, Robby. But look, the courts decided differently, and I feel like in that conversation, and it's a slightly different issue. I mean, there's some legal nuance here, but these people do have a significant presence on college campuses as well. You know, one of my best friends, I was telling you before we recorded, did ROTC and ended up in the Navy for 8 years, and she stayed longer than she had to because it does provide certain opportunities. But those opportunities were largely, okay, if I stay a little longer, they'll also pay for grad school. Mm-hmm. If I stay a little longer, then, you know, I can put more savings away and not have to compete in this economy, which, as someone who graduated in 2007 into the middle of the financial crisis, was not looking good for anybody in my generation.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with the program recruiting on college campuses, being active on college campuses. You have the right to protest them as well, obviously, but they have the right to be there. And I don't particularly object to them offering a path to people who can't afford to pay for college otherwise to, you know, make this choice and get their education that way. I think that's all fine. At the level of high school, though, and especially with the level of how much it's being compelled, it seems to, based on this article. I mean, maybe this article is presenting only one side, but there seemed to be some concession on the part of the JROTC that the way this is being done is bad. That is bad.
Well, if 44% of the military is staffed through these programs, you cannot ignore the incentive that the administrators of these programs have to make sure that this machine keeps churning out young blood. I mean, it is too much of an investment on one pathway. If we lived in a place where people were truly freely making these kinds of decisions, you would expect there to be some more diversity of the class status of people who go into the military, diversity of racial status that go into the military. But you'll find it's also very difficult to get military reports on what the actual demographics of the armed forces are.
It's always very. My understanding is the geographical, the lack of geographic diversity is the very compelling stat about the Army.
In what way?
That's the South. It's everyone from the South.
And I'm not trying to be funny, but who lives in the South? Most black people live in the South disproportionately. We live where we were put. So, you know, I don't know. A lot of people were talking about this story. I'm really glad that there are some eyes on it right now. But I do think it opens up bigger questions about what we're doing with our military. The funding of this program has tripled over recent years. We can't find funding for these kids to get educations outside of the military. You know, the extent to which this is a coercive project. I think we need to examine why it is that our educational system is so expensive in the first place, as you've often argued, that makes people have to make these kind of choices, and why it is that all of these systems seem to be built in just a way to make sure that we can have the appearance as a society of having a voluntary standing army where people are just patriots and they want to do what they want to do, but in the reality that we live in a very, very coercive state where people's freedoms and real decision-making ability are constrained by their economic circumstances.
All right, well, we'll have more Rising in just a minute. Please stay with us.